Our tonight presentation is by Chalmers Cards and Signal. It is a guerrilla project fighting homelessness in Toronto. Right now there are two products, Chalmers Cards and Chalmers Signal. You might remember the Chalmers Signal live map from background work over the last few months. Chalmers cards are wooden information booklets that are designed to be given out at Toronto's emergency shelters and folks sleeping on the street of Toronto. They explain how to access social services. The Chalmers hope to make shelter occupancy data more accessible and faster to community among shelters in Toronto. It is an internet-connected device that publishes real-time occupancy data among shelters around Toronto. Sorry about my mistake. Their website. Please welcome Zach and Steve.
Hello. Is it okay if I share my screen for the presentation?
Yes, you can.
Hopefully everybody can see that okay. Steve, are you on too?
Yes, I'm on.
So my name's Zach, and this is Stephen. We work together on the Chalmers project. We're a guerrilla project working in Toronto to fight homelessness. Excuse me, I had some mango in my throat. We try and identify small and discrete areas in Toronto social support network that could use our help. Then we work with the shelter management and we try and build something for them. We have two active projects right now, as was previously said. We have Chalmers Cards, which are small information booklets that teach people about what social services are available to them, and the Chalmer Signal, which is a tool for shelter reception staff. Just a second. So these are the two current projects we've been working on, and we've been developing them in the Civic tech community for the last few years. So we thought that we would give you guys a rundown of what we've been working on over the last few years, and then what's coming up next as Stephen and I try and rebuild the Chalmer Signal into something more modern. So back in 2017, we started by making these things. I don't know if you guys can see my video, but we make these little wooden booklets, and they smell really nice, and they snap on your backpack. They're supposed to solve a problem with access to social services. If you don't own a computer, getting on the internet is difficult, where a lot of documentation for social services is. And if you didn't find out about it from the internet, you've probably found out about it from word of mouth or from perhaps a shelter counselor. We spent a lot of time talking with folks who were sleeping rough on the street in encampments around Toronto at the time, and just with folks who were panhandling and were happy for some friendly conversation. And we learned about some of the bottlenecks in the social support network. One of the big ones was that sometimes the intake process to get into a social support network was much easier than it would be made out to be on a pamphlet that would be given out at a shelter or on the internet. And Ontario Works is a really, really good example of this. The year before we started researching Chalmers Cards, Ontario Works completely reworked their intake process. For those who don't know, Ontario Works is social assistance in Toronto. So if you need a little bit more money to cover your rent, or you need some help from a social worker who can help you get registered with things like Toronto Employment Services, Ontario Works is a really good place to start. And the chart on the left here is when we tried to kind of map out what the intake process was like for Ontario Works, and it's big and complicated. They, on the website, I think they asked for like 3 different categories of ID, which like each have a few pieces of ID in them. It's this whole ridiculous process. But some really talented bureaucrats who were working with Ontario Works completely reworked the system and got it so that all you actually had to do was call Ontario Works and get assigned a caseworker. And then the caseworker would work with you to get all of the ID that you needed in order to get registered with Ontario Works. And sometimes on a case-by-case basis, caseworkers were able to get out stipend without you having all of your paperwork. So the documentation like really didn't match the services, and people were missing out on social services that were their civic right. So we started distributing pamphlets telling people about this new process that Ontario Works had made, and people were very grateful for the information and the conversation, but the pamphlets got lost or crumpled a lot because they were paper. So we started laser cutting them on wood, and we quickly learned that when you hand somebody something that smells nice and feels good in the hand, they tend to hold on to them. And in the past, we've like members of Chalmers Project have passed people on the street with one of these cards snapped to their backpack, which is a fun experience. A couple of important lessons learned that we feel we can pass on to the civic tech community from this project is folks really appreciate friendly conversation. That was like the big, like even when we were rolling out prototypes at Nodi, like almost universally people were happy to have somebody stop and just like ask them about how their day was and just talk to them about stuff. People really appreciate something that feels quality and feels like it's going to be durable. And also, we tried to kind of go to scale producing a lot of these. In the end, we ended up making about 1,000 of these booklets with the help of some other organizations, some other organizations like Ample Labs. But we kind of tried to do it on our own with just volunteers and hackerspaces around Toronto. For those who don't know, hackerspaces are places where a bunch of makers and tinkerers will share a space and tools. And almost always they will have a free night where if you're not a member, you can go in anyway and use the spaces. So we kind of tried to organize a group of volunteers to jump between the different free nights of hackerspaces and use the laser cutters there to produce Chalmers cards. It didn't end up working out because not all laser cutters are created equal, and there's only one space which had a laser cutter capable of etching the like really fine lines on the cards. But it was an important lesson in that hackerspaces are a surprising resource when it comes to producing hardware for some kind of volunteer or open source project, and when you need a lot of it and you need it quickly. After the Chalmers cards, we started working on this thing called the Chalmer Signal. But before it was the Chalmer Signal, it was known as something else. This project was not run by Stephen or I. It was actually run by some other Civic Tech members who, one of which is actually here tonight. Josh was a member of this project. It was called Base Count. And in the winter of 2017, Toronto, apart from COVID, Toronto saw one of its biggest homelessness crises in recent memory, for me at least. The chart on the left there is from an ombudsman report that was released in 2018 after that winter, discussing ways that the ombudsman for Toronto thought that the shelter administration should improve. And that chart, the blue line on the chart is the temperature throughout winter 2017-2018. The green line is folks checked into shelters recorded at 4 a.m., specifically at winter respite sites. And then the gray background there is how many spaces were available in winter respite sites. And we can see that on nights which were extremely cold, sometimes there were a lot of unused spaces. I think this gap here is 250 unused spaces. And right here, we can see that 250 gap when we had -15 weather, which is crazy. Like when the weather gets cold, people go inside. If you read the Ombudsman report, which is linked here, and I'll drop these slides in the Civic Tech channel, general channel later after this talk. If you read this Ombudsman report, you can read the Ombudsman talk about why this happened. The referral process for city shelters is very bottlenecked. It basically goes through 3 channels. There is a central intake phone number that is handled by the shelter administration, and they kind of, at the time, they shared a single Excel spreadsheet, which they used to track spaces available at shelters. There was an in-person location called the Streets to Homes Referral Center, which is on Peter Street, just east of Queen's Banana. And then there's 311 Toronto. And these were like the 3 only ways that you could get a referral to a shelter in the city of Toronto. The other obvious ways would be to show up at a shelter or to just talk to reception staff at a shelter, and then they could get a referral for you. But reception staff will either just make phone calls for you, or they'll use one of these 3 channels. And showing up at a space doesn't guarantee that you'll be let in if shelters already reach their fire code capacity. So the result of this very bottleneck system was really poor load management between the different shelter sites. And we saw situations like we see in this chart, where the weather is really cold, the demand for shelter is really high, but people aren't getting referred to shelters properly. Basecount was an attempt to address this problem with a web app that allowed shelter staff to more easily report to all other shelter staff how much space that they had left in their space. Unfortunately, due to some miscommunication between the Basecount project and the shelter administration in the city of Toronto, this project got canned after about a year of development. There's a lot of work that went into this. There's a lot of in-person interviews, just going into shelters and talking with the reception staff and finding out exactly what their problem was, getting them to design the project with us. And we did a lot of good work with it, but nobody at the shelter administration was willing to stick their neck out for us. And when we got a not so nice email from them about it, it kind of killed morale and the project died a little bit. When that happened, we had to pivot to an electronics and more lightweight backend, because the people who stuck around with Basecamp didn't have the skills to maintain this project and finish it. But that came with a couple of fun advantages. So we're going to give you a quick live demo of what we pivoted to. Those of you who've been to Civic Tech before have probably seen us demo this live during the project pitches. It's a frozen web page. Here we go. This is one of the reasons we're rewriting it. Oh man, always during the live demo. Okay. So this is a map of the city of Toronto, and the circles on the map represent shelters. The color of the circle represents how much space they have left in them. And if we click on a circle, we get information about the shelter, the name, important information, who they serve. All populations are allowed. It's not, for example, female or male only. Pets are allowed. We have the address and the phone number, the 2 things that you need for getting a shelter, telling somebody where to go, giving them directions, and making a phone call to the shelter staff to confirm that space is available. And then we can see here how much space there is. 39 out of 88 sitting spaces and 42 beds available. The way the number changes is with one of these devices. Hopefully you guys can see my camera. I'm holding up a little electronic device with a dial on this camera on it. And if you see, the number on the screen is the same as the one on the map. If I turn the dial, the device changes color. Yeah, and the map will update. So this is what we built so far. And what we're doing right now is reaching out to shelters and reception staff and trying to just give them some demos and hopefully get a little bit of buy-in, maybe deploy a prototype to their location. If anybody watching this talk right now is interested in volunteering with us, this is an area where we need a lot of help, is just getting in touch with staff and organizing talks like this one, so we can demo the shelter, the Chalmers Signal to them, and maybe get it into some shelters.
In particular, may I add on a little bit to our approach of the hardware piece, Zach?
Yeah, please. Yeah.
Yeah. So one of the things we noticed while talking to shelter staff was that they were often really busy. So these devices that we are planning to see. Oh, is my audio really bad? One sec. Oh, shoot, that speaker. How does this sound? Does this sound okay? Oh, is it still echoey right now? Okay. Okay. Let me just try switching both the built-in speakers and see how that works. Hello, can you hear me? Sorry about this. Oh, okay, still echo. Okay, I'm just going to turn off the volume. Oh, okay. If it's not too bad, I'll try to keep speaking. But if it's too bad, someone let me know. Basically, yeah, we talked to some shelter staff, and they were really busy at, especially during the peak hours when people would come into the respite center and ask for referrals. It got to the point where they were picking up phone calls, trying to put people on hold, calling the different respite shelters in the region, and that the level of workload they had during those peak hours made it so that it was really hard for them to even go onto like a web interface and make updates there. It would be better if there was if we made the action of updating the system as simple as possible, because the current system that is put in place by the City of Toronto is inconvenient enough to use that the numbers only really get updated once or twice a day. There's still an echo. Okay, that's unfortunate. I'll try to get that figured out shortly before I talk more. But yeah, long story short, our decision to stick with hardware is mainly to make it as easy as possible for the system to get updated, because only if the system is updated as frequently as possible can it be the most of the most effectiveness to the people who really need it. I'm going to try to fix my mic now. Sorry about that.
I've been video chatting with Stephen all week. These things only happen during your presentation. Where are we? So this slide is about all the work that Stephen's been doing rewriting the backend. While Stephen fixes his mic, I can maybe explain some reasons why it's being rebuilt. The first one is, of course, the if you care to look at our GitHub, you'll see that the code that I just demoed for you is very spaghetti. I didn't write it with any modern tools. So we're going to be rewriting it with something that's going to be a little bit easier to maintain, a little bit more performant in the future. And oh yeah, Stephen, you good?
Yeah, can you guys hear me?
Yeah, that's better.
Is the quality okay?
Oh,
or is it like the quality okay? Oh, okay, nice. So yeah, this is the if someone can't hear me, please let me know. This is the new, latest and greatest updated version of the interface for other projects at Chalmers. This is a work in progress. Right now we have a list of shelters, but below that, the sound quality is very bad. Damn, why is it like this? I guess, you know what? I'll just try to turn off my speakers and use my computer microphone. And someone please let me know if that is better. Okay, I've muted the computer speakers, so there should be no echo. Yeah, so this will be like a place both for the public. Oh, the echo is back, but why is it like this? Okay, I'm just gonna stick with my earbuds because it seems like it was worse than the sound quality. Okay. Right, so I'll just do a quick demo. So we have, this is like the shelter information and management page. Once you go in, you get a little like snapshot of shelter information. Most shelters have their own website, but I thought it was important to make just like these pages so that every shelter would register. Also get a page that's mobile friendly, accessible. So I should be using both the system microphones, which should be okay. This will display information like quick links to both calling, emailing, or going directly to the shelter website. And it'll also display capacity information from the signals at the shelter. If you're an admin, you can also go in and edit this information to keep it accurate. And this will sync with the signals, and that signals will update the capacity on these pages as well as on the main map that will be written here soon. So yeah, this is really just like kind of an administration panel for the Chalmers systems with both shelters and signals, where you can register a signal to a shelter and it'll just start providing information and data for it. It is also built in such a way that you can perform analytics. So we will be able to track data points like through time and see how the basically like a graph view of the changes in shelter occupancy, both at like the number of beds level, as well as a head count level. So those are the things that we've been modernizing as we move from a prototype into production in a couple of shelters around, shelters and respite centers around Toronto.
So just to add on to what Stephen was saying, a big reason this current demo that we gave you is using Firebase as a backend, and pushing anything to Firebase from the microcontroller that's in this thing it's a little bit hacky, and we're using a library that's been deprecated, and a feature on Firebase's end that's been deprecated. So this isn't just a better solution; it's also necessary. And Stephen's done an amazing job rebuilding this backend. Blah, blah, blah. Can I share my screen? That's pretty much it. Anything else that you're curious about, feel free to join us during the breakout. In closing, though, we did want to say homelessness didn't always exist in Toronto the way that it does today. We believe the fight against homelessness, although it seems hopeless sometimes, it is a winnable one. And we believe a small part of that fight is finding small discrete problems like the ones we showed you today and trying to build something for it. If that resonates with you and it interests you, please join us in the breakout. I guess at this point we can open up to questions.
Yeah, if anyone's interested. Oh,